Forge FC is ready for their upcoming match.
Simply stunning stuff! And finally, their goal! My word, what a rocket!
Now, let's get you up to date with Anthony Urciuoli and Match Day Preview on the Forge Audio Network.
Hello, Forge fans. Anthony Urciuoli with you. Match Day Preview, the one we've been waiting for all week. Forge FC on the road in our nation's capital to take on Atletico Ottawa with first place on the line. Match day is Saturday. Game time is at 6:30. Forge FC, 35 points. They are in second place right now in the CPL table, 3 points back of Ottawa. Atletico, though, has played 2 more matches. So Forge 3 points back, 2 matches in hand. Forge also tied with Pacific, who currently sits in third because they've played 1 extra match than Forge has, and Forge has a 1-point lead on Calvary. So Atletico, Forge, Pacific, Calvary all split by exactly 4 points from 1 to 4. Those are your playoff clubs. Now, unless something spectacular happens, Valor on the outside right now. There's 7 points out of that 4th and final playoff spot. So right now, let's just focus on those top 4, specifically the 2 at the top, Ottawa and Forge. How did Ottawa get here? I don't think anybody predicted that Atletico Ottawa would be not only at the top of the table now, but they've spent time up there during multiple periods during this CPL season. And right now, this was a team that we thought maybe playing a little over their heads, maybe not as good as their record would indicate. They've proven it. Let's just look at their last 2 matches. Atletico, knowing that they need to ramp things up in order to finish at the top of the table, have delivered. They won at Calvary 3-0. They beat Halifax 3-2. So that's 2 matches in a row. A club that was not expected to score much. That was expected to be their downfall. They've scored 6 goals in their last 2 matches. And they've won 3 out of the last 4. Forge FC trending in a different direction after a 6-game winning streak. Now, Forge FC, not only did they win 6 in a row and just look like they were cruising into that top spot, they were 6-0 and outscoring opponents 17-3. Almost 3 goals per match they were scoring, giving up less than 1. They're giving up a goal every other game, essentially. So it was a very impressive run. Not the most sustainable. I think anyone that looks at that record and what they were doing, as good as Forge is, that was an unbelievable run they were on. Since then, 2 losses in a row, outscored 4-2. A costly loss at home to York United, potentially. Ottawa is fired up and they're at home and they want to show their supporters that they can be champions. And what a way to do it. What better way than to do it with Forge FC in your town, in your stadium, and beating them in front of your home fans. Forge, of course, have other ideas. Bobby Smyrniotis, head coach of Forge FC, called their last match against York last weekend at home, which was resulted in a 3-1 loss. Forge's worst match in 4 years since the club's been around. The last time he said that was also this season. It was after the loss to CF Montreal on the road. They lost 3-0 there. This one against York, it was different. It just, you were at least in that match against Montreal, you were on the road. Sure, they didn't play well, but that was a very difficult environment. The team was still kind of feeling their way out, filling out their new roster components, and hadn't quite hit their groove yet. The match against York, after, Forge had lost the previous match in, a match that they really, really wanted against Calvary, Forge ended up dropping a 2-1 decision at Calgary and then hoping to bounce back, getting another opportunity the following week to secure, to get yourself alone in first place and to win the 905 Derby and get some redemption for that disappointing loss to Calvary. And Forge just simply played terribly. There were some good things early, especially, but as soon as York scored the opening goal, they scored it about 7 minutes in, Forge just looked like a different team after that. The tempo wasn't there. The energy wasn't there. So they're looking to rectify that. And one thing you'll know, after that match against Montreal, when they did lose 3-0, and at that time they said it was their worst loss in franchise history. Boy, did they respond. I mean, they responded as better than anyone could have maybe hoped. So an opportunity to do that again. Sometimes losses can be blessings in disguise, especially when Forge still control their own destiny. Only Forge will decide whether they want to finish in first place or not. Because if they show up and if they play their game in and out, game to game, not taking any of these games off, we know how they can be unbeatable when they play their game. And so maybe those 2 losses, especially the one against York at home, is going to be, it's just going to ramp things up a little bit. Now, I spoke to head coach and technical director Bobby Smyrniotis this week, and I'm surprised Ottawa's this good, but Bobby wasn't.
Not necessarily, because if you look at the history of things, you could say they weren't performing well last year, but they're a totally different team. They're a veteran team, a lot of older players, players with experience in this league who have come in from different teams playing in the league. So I think they've put together a team that's resilient, that defends very well. Doesn't give a lot to the opponents. You look at their last game against Cavalry. They haven't entered the opponent's half many times, but they've won 3-0. So they found a recipe to get results, and that's working for them. And I think in this league, with any team, if you stick to some tactical principles in the long term, it pays out for you. And I think that's what's happening with them.
So we know Ottawa's going to defend. We know they're going to defend as well, probably better than anybody in this league. But how are they scoring? They're taking advantage of their opportunities. They're waiting for mistakes, and their counter has been spectacular. And when they do get into scoring positions, the Ottawa leads the league right now in successful 1v1s. So they have the quality to take guys on. They have enough quality, one-on-one, to take you on and to make you pay if you do make a mistake and you're stranded on an island. If you're a defender having to go one-on-one against some of these Ottawa players, there's enough quality there that they can be a handful. So, once again, if you're Forge FC, I feel like we say this every week, but if they don't beat themselves, if they can play relatively mistake-free, they're in a pretty good position. But Bobby talked about this last match in that last loss. Tempo, energy, Forge has to play with it. They have to use their press, they have to force mistakes, and they have to create turnovers. And they really want that first goal. But we'll hold off there because 3 keys to the match is dropping very soon. So stay tuned for that, and we'll get more in depth on what Forge needs to do to claim victory. Big news out of the CPL today, and I should mention we will be joined shortly by Gordon Smith, who's the color commentator. He calls Atletico Ottawa matches for the radio broadcast on TSN 1200. He's been a guest with us before. He will join us again, and we'll talk more Ottawa. I need to mention, though, big news for the Canadian Premier League, the announcement of a new CPL commissioner, and it is Mark Noonan. Not only will he be CPL commissioner, he's also going to be CEO of Canadian Soccer Business. Mark has a very, very impressive resume. He's from Westport, Connecticut. He spent a lot of time in the U.S. He was the chief marketing officer for the United States Soccer Federation. He helped develop the U.S. soccer brand, a key figure in the successful marketing of the U.S. national women's team that won the 1999 FIFA Women's World Cup. He's worked for Major League Soccer. He's worked in Africa. He's a soccer guy. He's a sports guy. He's a marketing guy, which we'll have to see how this plays out, but that's pretty good news for the CPL. Anything that has to do with marketing, branding when you're a new-ish league is a good thing. So looking forward to meeting Mark and talking to him, because that's the other part of this. Mark Noonan will be a guest right here with me, and I believe Jessica Lisi is also going to be joining us, my co-host, and we're gonna talk to Mark. And we'll get his feelings on the league, his vision going forward. And you can ask questions as well. That's right. Send your questions before Monday, August 29th. Email your questions for the new commish to matchday@forgefc.ca. Questions, comments, we'll ask him directly, and you can hear the answer for yourself on YouTube on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and both your visual and audio content. So with that, we will bring in Gordon Smith, color commentator for Atletico Ottawa, covering the club for TSN 1200. So before we get to the first place battle between Ottawa and Forge, big news coming out of the CPL with a new commissioner. Any thoughts?
Not really. I mean, other than it was probably about time. We'd been sort of going along for a wee while, and I think, in all honesty, it kind of sort of dropped off the radar of a lot of people with the season sort of reaching a crescendo in the sort of last 7 or 8 games for a lot of teams. But decisions made. Best of luck to the lad. I'm sure he's gonna need it. It's a big job. It's a big task. Dual sort of CSB CPL. And I think if everyone agrees they've got the right man, then we've got to give him the full backing. Fingers crossed that everything works out and that we can take the right positive steps for this league going forward, Anthony.
And I thought it was a key that, Mark Noonan has a very extensive marketing and branding background, which would be pretty important if you're still a new-ish league, still kind of trying to find your footing in some of these markets.
Yeah, and I think, there's already been positive sponsorship within the CPL. But I think if he's able to branch into, I think one thing that maybe we're a little bit weaker on is local sponsorship for, like within the Ottawa area or within the Halifax area. I mean, obviously there are some local sponsors, but if you're able to drive even bigger and better local sponsorship, then fair play to him. But I think overall it's got to be looked on as a positive hire, and we move forward and hope that everything goes according to plan as far as the committee that was tasked with finding this next commissioner is going to do.
Yeah, and you've been following the sport for a while in this country and in Ottawa.
Yeah.
And it looks like, we're at a point now where soccer in Canada isn't just this, we used to always talk about how, it's the most popular sport among children and it's growing and it's growing. It seems to have finally hit a point now where it's a business and there's a lot of money to be made from it.
There certainly is. And I mean, when you think back to the old Fury days, OSEG got out of the market, I think, in a lot of reasons because they were losing a lot of money. There was a lot of money on a year-by-year basis that was just going out the window. I don't want to speculate on any figures, but it was certainly up there. And I'm assuming when they made the pros and the cons list, the cons far outweighed the staying in football, so to speak. And it was just a case of let's cut our losses and move on. And of course, Jeff Hunt and Atletico Madrid came along and sky's the limit. We're moving on. But you're right. It is seeming like we're getting to a better place. We've already got Vancouver coming in as a new team next year. We're hoping that there may be a 10th team added at some point over the next 6 months to a year to hopefully start maybe in 2024. So a lot of positives right now for football here in Canada.
Yeah, and we know that CPL will eventually be expanding into that Windsor area with the former CPL commissioner being awarded a team. So the expansion, it's happening pretty quickly. Like I don't know what I expected when the league was announced, but we're getting big things are happening. It's nice.
Yeah, I think the one thing that you've got to be wary of is that we've still got to get into Quebec. We've got to make inroads into Quebec, and fingers crossed that's part of the new commissioner's mandate is to get us a team in Quebec, whether it's Quebec City, whether it's somewhere on the outskirts of Montreal. I know we don't like to compete with MLS, but you've got to do something to make sure you get into that really, really large market. And if Windsor is a done deal, and I'm coming and going, I'm not sure if it's 100% a done deal. I know there is discussion that he's been offered a franchise. I don't know if it's been announced that they are sort of going to become an actual team in the CPL. And if they are, and if that's part of the process, then that's great. But I think we've got to start getting into provinces that we don't have position in right now. Obviously, Ontario, we've got 3 teams. Alberta, we've got nothing in Saskatchewan, nothing in Quebec. I'm pretty sure Saskatchewan could be a real gold mine for football, for soccer, if it eventually does get all the sort of infrastructure problems sorted out and we move on from there, would it be nice to get a team out even further out past Halifax? Certainly it would. And that way we're a true coast to coast if we do get into Newfoundland. But right now, let's get to 9. Fingers crossed we get to 10 in the next 6 months to a year. And then who knows where things go from there.
All right. Well, we do know where things are going this weekend, and that is a big-time battle between Forge and Ottawa. I'd been asking coaches, players, if they're surprised to see that Ottawa still kind of hanging around and now taking over top spot. Yeah. No one sounded surprised, which, I mean, I don't know what your expectations were going into the year, but it's been impressive.
Well, the expectations, at least from my point of view, and I think my broadcast partner, AJ Jackiebeck, that I'm sure you're aware of, we would expect in playoffs. I mean, there was no reason with the players that were brought in, the coaching staff that was brought in, that a top 4 position was not going to be a goal. Well, certainly was a goal, but it wasn't going to be a reality. And the season has played out the way I think a lot of us thought, up there challenging. Maybe a little bit surprising that we're challenging for first place in that number 1 seed overall for home advantage all the way through the playoffs. But I think right now, when you look at the position they're in a really good spot. I did some calculations, I think it was yesterday or the day before. When you look at, to me, the only other team that can crash the top 4 is a Valor. But I mean, I think unfortunately Halifax and York, they're just running out a driveway to get enough points to get into the top 4. But Valor's close thereabouts. So I think Valor's got something like 8 games left, which is 24 points to pick up. Well, even if they were to pick up 5 wins out of those 8, and that's a big ask because it's higher than the percentage of wins they've got. I think they've only got 7 wins out of their 20 games so far. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say they get 15 points by hook or by crook. I think that only puts them at a maximum of 42, which is only 4 points ahead of where Ottawa is right now. So, and theoretically, if you take that approach, Ottawa just needs to pick up 5 points in their remaining 7 games, and they pretty much guarantee themselves a playoff spot, top 4. So I think it's looking good for them. I think overall they've had that type of season where they haven't allowed losses to mount up. We talked about they've had 5 losses this season, and after every loss they've picked up points, 3 wins and 2 draws. And I think that's something that to finish in a top 4 position, you've got to be able to do. You can't allow that bleeding to continue. You look at a situation right now, since that 4-0 game a month or so ago, that Forge actually, took Ottawa out the backyard and gave them a whooping. Ottawa's gone on, they've won 3 and lost 1 out of their 4 games, whereas Forge, on the other hand, have lost 2 and won 1. The one game coming against Halifax in a 1-0 win. So sort of both teams have diverged a wee bit. You would have expected Forge to go on and just keep putting the pedal to the metal, so to speak. But they've hit a wee bit of a lull. Bobby obviously said the last game against York was one of the worst that he's actually seen by his team. And for him to say that's something, because, the quality and the expectations at Forge are that high that to make a statement like that it's, probably one of the worst he's seen in his time coaching, that's quite a lot to say for a Forge team that I'm sure will be looking to bounce back and get some sort of a same result that they did a month ago.
Yeah, and the real winners, regardless of the outcome, is probably going to be the neutral supporter who's looking at 2 teams. I would be shocked if either team fails to show up. I mean, Ottawa's motivated for various reasons. Forge is motivated. These are going to be 2 clubs that are at least near their best. And for Ottawa, as we know, Ottawa's, if not the best defending team in this league in terms of their structure and their shape and their discipline.
Yeah.
But they've been able to score. I mean, I think it's 6 goals in their last 2 matches. Where does the offense cut? I mean, is it as simple as saying that they're being opportunistic and winning on these counters? What's been working for them offensively?
I think when you look at the bigger picture, defensively, which is what has gotten them through these first, I would say, 3 or so months, and then this little run they've gone on, as you said, 3 against Halifax, 3 last weekend against Cavalry, and it's a situation where they're a little top heavy. I think the top scorers are Ollie Bassett, Brian Wright, and I think it's Tabla's the third one. I can't quite
Yeah.
remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's Tabla. Yeah.
Those three players have scored something like 75% of Ottawa's goals this season. Is that a good thing? Yes, it shows that you've got three guys that are on fire. Could also be a bad thing in that if those guys are not having a good game, where is the secondary scoring, so to speak, going to come from? But right now, I don't think head coach Carlos Gonzalez is worried about that. He just knows that he's got his team playing the way he wants. And now they're starting to score goals, as you said, which can only be good as they head into these final 7 games and hopefully a decent run to the title in the playoffs. But I think one of the key things, and when you think back to that game against Forge, the 4-0 game, Forge had 4 shots on goal. They scored every single one of them. Ottawa also had 4 shots on goal, but obviously couldn't get the ball in the back of the net. That afternoon, I think Bobby had his tactics spot on. They were making runs in behind that back line of Ottawa. They weren't getting picked up. They were making runs down the channel, diagonal balls. Becker was throwing them up and over the top. So when you look at a game plan, you could not have scripted it any better for Forge when they went out and played that 4-0 game. However, at 1-0, the key moment of the game with the penalty kick that was not given, that could have changed. I think it was early in the game, 20 some odd minutes. Wasn't to say that Forge wouldn't have gone on and still won the game very comfortably. But at 1-1, it would have given, the fan base a little bit more impetus, the team a little bit more energy. And it's funny, I watched the highlights of that game again today. And at that incident, Tissot gets a shot away, keeper makes a good save, palms it away to the left, and then Tissot continues his run, gets there first, the player does make contact with him. And that's all well and good that nobody make, but Kyle Becker standing at the edge of the 18-yard box, and you literally see him putting his hands up to his head. I hadn't noticed that before until today, as if to say,
Yeah, I didn't notice that.
uh-oh, that's a penalty. And then he looks at the official, she doesn't give it, and everything sort of goes. And I think at that point, the game started to get away from Ottawa. Their emotions started to kick in. They felt a little bit aggrieved that some of the calls weren't going their way, Anthony. And that just went from bad to worse. Second goal was scored, third early in the second half. And that third goal, unfortunately, came about a minute or two after Ollie Bassett at the other end had a shot that just went inches wide of that left-hand post. And if that goes in at 2-1, again, you're talking a different result. But 4-0 at the end of the day, it may not have been Ottawa's best performance, but I certainly enjoyed watching the way that Forge played that afternoon. It was exceptional football. The possession, the movement, the running into space. You couldn't, as I said, have asked to as a neutral, to sit and watch a better game, and hopefully it'll be a little bit better reversal of fortune for Ottawa here coming up on Saturday night.
Is the fan base, I mean, is this a playoff type atmosphere now? Are the fans really just fired up for this opportunity to it's not just about winning, right? You get Forge. So a win against a team like Forge, all of a sudden now you're 6 points or however many points they'd be clear of Forge. I mean, there's a lot at stake here. Is the fan base embracing the moment?
Oh, most definitely. I think back to 2015 when the Fury went on their run to the NASL Soccer Bowl. The semi-final that was played here, they just over 9,000, just under 10,000 actually, for that semi-final game against Minnesota. And you have to remember, the previous year they'd had 13,000 or so for their opening game at TD Place against the Cosmos. A few days later, when Glasgow Rangers came to town, they had just under 8,000 for that game. So the potential is there. And it's like everything else. If you're a winning team, you're going to get more people out to the stadium. It's an unfortunate dynamic that's how it is in football right now, or any sport really. I mean, the Senators were fighting the same thing. They were down to 14, 15,000 the last number of years because they haven't been winning. So as this plays out and it gets closer, the Dub, as they're affectionately known as Section W, they just seem to get louder and louder and louder every single game. And that's what that culture's all about. We started it in 2014 with the Fury. It left in 2019, only be it for a few months. In 2019, we came back with, 2020, we came back with the Atletico, and fingers crossed they are able to will this team into a playoff spot, Anthony, here in 2022.
And who knows, maybe a championship preview in Ottawa this weekend.
It could be.
Which would be a great match.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at the top of the table. I mean, those top 4 teams have really been separating themselves over the last sort of month. I mean, Valor's tried to hang on there, and then, they have a poor result, and it just seems to put them back where they drop points, other teams pick up a point at least or 3, and that, that sort of makes it difficult for them. If they're looking to try and catch up, they're still, a bunch of points behind the 4th place team. So good luck to everybody, but we're certainly hoping that Ottawa's able to continue their good form over this last sort of 6 weeks and continue it into the final 7 games.
Yeah, and the other side of this, when a loss in this league can be extra costly because the teams are so tight. It's, these are 6-point swings going on a weekly basis. So it should be an exciting stretch down to the finish line. Gordon Smith, thank you so much. You'll be welcome. Calling the game.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. So I'm normally doing color commentator. AJ's normally doing play-by-play, but AJ has to do the Red Blacks game. He's going to be out in Edmonton. And their game's at 7:00, so I'm actually filling in doing play-by-play. So that'll be it's not new to me. I've done play-by-play before for online streaming for both Carleton and University of Ottawa, as well as national championships. So it's not something that's new to me, but certainly I'll have someone else in the colour commentary seat with me, and fingers crossed everything goes well. But above all else, I think, as you said, from a neutral standpoint, you're looking for a good game. And fingers crossed we're able to get that, and not hammering one way or the other. Certainly if Ottawa wins 4-0, I wouldn't complain, but I'm sure we're going to get a quality game either way, and Ottawa will definitely be up for it. Whether it's a revenge game or not, Anthony, I don't want to call it that for now, but certainly it's going to be on their mind, because 4-0 was not a flattering scoreline that afternoon.
Awesome. All right, Gordon Smith, thank you so much for doing this.
Cheers. You're very welcome, Anthony. All the best. Cheers.
All right. Always a joy talking to Gordon. He's been around for a while, and he's covered a lot of soccer in this country, and especially in our nation's capital. So Forge, Ottawa, Saturday, 6:30. Be sure to tune in. I mentioned 3 keys to the match. That'll be coming out very shortly. So however, wherever you listen and get your Forge content, it will be up shortly. And Forge on the road now for 3 straight matches, which let me skip ahead, because Forge will return home for a huge one. September 10th, 5:00. That's a Saturday. Forge hosting Cavalry FC. And a huge promotion for you. September special. With your, for $29.99. So for $30 a ticket, you get a gold level ticket and a bench beer sampling. So you get your beer, you get your tickets, and then while you're there's even more beer, because it's $5 beer till kickoff. But $30 will get you the ticket and that beer. So fun promotion for September, as we know that match against Cavalry is going to be a huge one. But first things first, taking care of Ottawa. That happens this weekend. I enjoy talking to you. I love it. I gotta go though, but we'll talk to you soon.
We are the Forge, the mighty, mighty Forge. You just don't think you understand. Forge FC is prepared, and now you are informed. This has been Match Day Preview with Anthony Urciuoli on the Forge Audio Network. Subscribe on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.